So welcome to the webinar, everyone. My name is Chris Lay. I am with the Virginia Department of Small Business and Supplier Diversity. So I know to say that last year was disruptive is such an understatement. And it's been disruptive to both our personal lives and our professional lives, right? And it's been especially challenging for small business owners. I went through the whole PPP, EIDL, Rebuild Virginia grant, so I know there's so many businesses out there struggling. So I'm thrilled to kick off this wellness series today with Nancy Sajati from the Life Quality by Design. So this wellness series was really intended for small business owners who face the challenges of running a business, balancing their family priorities, and achieving that spiritual calmness that sometimes you just need as a small business owner. And today we're going to explore ways to maintain your work-life balance when you're so busy keeping your business afloat, and your business is going to slowly take over your life because that's what happens when you have a small business, right? And before we get started, some housekeeping. So please use the chat to introduce yourself to everyone else on this call. This webinar is being recorded. If you have any questions for our speaker, please type that in the chat, and we're going to address that in the Q&A portion after her presentation. So without further ado, please welcome Nancy Sajati.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris, for that introduction. And also, I'd like to thank Chris for all the work she does to support small businesses in Virginia, helping them learn to gain access and land government contracts, and also just be there for giving these types of workshops. So thank you, Chris, and the Virginia Department of Small Business and Supplier Diversity. And welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for taking time out of, I know, what is a very busy schedule for everyone to attend this morning. I have a single objective, and that's really that you take something away that's immediately applicable or useful, valuable to you. And as Chris mentioned, most of what I'm going to talk about is really applicable to anyone in their lives. But when you're a small business owner, some things are amplified or a bit unique. And so I actually just want to start with first slide here. And this is kind of what it feels like often to be a small business owner. I think you might agree. I call it the chief everything to everyone officer. And it's kind of because of the nature of what we do. As entrepreneurs, these are just dictionary definitions here. One who organizes, manages, and assumes the risk of a business. So that's a huge responsibility that we take on. And if we have employees, we're taking on the lives of other people as well. And we're managing risk. And what is risk, right? It's the possibility of loss or injury. That can be loss of your business, your customers, money, employees, or injury. And that could be to you through the nature of your business or work, or again, clients. So there's a lot always going on. So there's perpetual pressure on all of us all of the time. And that is a little bit different than just the average person who has a job and somebody else is taking care of a lot of this for them. So kind of how we operate our businesses and how we live our lives and the conscious decisions we make, as well as a lot of external factors like we've just had COVID that we have no control over, really do impact our well-being. And I like to think of well-being in sort of two dimensions that really relate to the physical and the psychosocial needs that we have as a human species. I call the standard of living sort of what we feel when we have, how secure we feel and how satisfied our needs are with respect to access to resources we need to meet our lower level needs. These would be things obviously like food and water and protection from the elements in terms of home, clothing, etc. And then what we might call the quality of living, which is how we feel about ourselves and our lives. And we can think of this in terms of the higher level needs that we get met, so our psychosocial needs. And so when we talk about surviving versus thriving, we're really sort of talking about those two different dimensions. So, you know, given that it's so challenging to maintain well-being while you're an entrepreneur, you know, why is it that most of us choose this kind of life? And I think in discussions I've had over the years, I've been an entrepreneur myself for 20 years. My father was an entrepreneur for most of his adult life. And it sort of comes back to this definition I like to use for success, which is there's only one success: to be able to spend life in your own way. There's something very, very satisfying and very lucrative about being in complete control of most of the decisions you need to make about your life and your business. And that's quite different than being an employee somewhere. This quote actually is from a novel from a 19th century author who's an American. And I think, again, if you really think about this, and again, yesterday, I happened to reconnect with a trainer, personal trainer, and he is no longer with the gym. That was where I met him. And he is now running a business out of his home. And I asked him if he was planning on going back to the gym. And he said, absolutely no way. Even though with all the pressures, he just really feels like he is so much more successful working for himself. And we sort of discussed this definition, and he more or less agreed. But I want to do a little bit of surveying. This is just a few questions I want you to start thinking about your life and sort of what's specific to you, so that as I go along with these slides, you can start thinking about what I'm talking about really specific to you in your life. And to the extent that you want to share with other people, please go ahead and share it in the chat box. If you don't feel comfortable but you still want to share, you can email me after the presentation. And if I get enough responses, I can aggregate and send out the data if people are interested. But basically, we have controllable and uncontrollable factors in our lives. And we've just come through sort of a humbling and harrowing year with COVID. So I'd just like you to take like a second and, rate your quality of life using this 5-point scale and just think about it. If you want to share numbers, I'm actually going to put right now, kind of how I think I'm feeling in the chat box. You're welcome to, oops, I think I did it in the chat box. There we go. You're welcome to share your own. If you don't want to, again, no pressure. And I'm really happy to see that a few fives. That is great news. I'm not sure if that's because we're just so relieved to be emerging from COVID, or that you have just been a very successful business owners for a long time. And I see someone's giving some reasons there. This is fabulous. So what I'd like to do now is just dig a little deeper into this, just to get you thinking about what has obviously created some great success for people. And if you are on the other end of the scale and you're not sharing, this is not any kind of shaming event. This is to really, again, allow people to be reflective and share what's working, what's not working. So I'm going to go to the next sort of set of questions. I want you to think really specifically about what you were able to do regularly during the past year that brought you pleasure, peace, and or gratitude. Because it was challenging, maybe you had some disruptions in your routine that things you did prior you weren't able to do, you maybe reconfigured. And we'll revisit this a little later in the talk, so we'll be able to come back and talk a little bit more. Then I also want you to be thinking about if I could wave a magic wand and change one thing that would improve your quality of life, what would that be? What would that look like? And I'll give you an example, not one for my own, but somebody that I met a few years ago when we get to the end, so we can have something specific to talk about. Okay, I think we could probably all agree, though, that 2020 was a clarifying experience and also a terrifying experience at different points in time. I mean, one thing it definitely showed us, reminded us, for those who are not, I have a biology background, as do a couple of people on the call. We are biological beings and vulnerable to things that threaten our ability to meet our needs. And basically, we learned that adversity, unexpected adversity, can hit anyone or everyone at any time, and that our ability to absorb the shock of adverse events really does protect our well-being, or makes us vulnerable. And so I want to talk a little bit what I call shock absorbers, and the statement to remember to feed them before you need them. I mean, essentially, stress and strain from all different sources can put a drain on these: our financial resources, our mental and physical energy, and our attachments to other people. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I mean by that. Just in my own friend group, 3 people I know have initiated divorces. And that was very surprising. But that was due to the stress and strain of having small children and some financial issues that cropped up, as well as being confined to home 24/7 for periods of time. I want to talk about attachment because I use the word, and really I mean attachment systems in a biological, psychological sense. To me, it's a noun, the outcome of supportive relationships. It's an enduring emotional bond that connects people across time and space and motivates mutual caring behavior. It reflects what I call healthy self-interest, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and our universal human needs for three things. One, the care, safety, and protection, that need to know that someone has your back. That respect, compassion, and acceptance, the need to know that you're intrinsically valued as a person. And belonging and meaning, the need to know that your existence and contributions matter in the world. These bonds really are time dependent. They're specific to other people. They really need to get developed and maintained with face-to-face contact, because it really takes the five senses, maybe not taste, so I guess four of the five senses to really create sort of these images of people that we connect with that help us bond kind of biochemically. And that biochemical capacity, which is hardwired and is an evolutionary adaptation, is necessary but not sufficient, in that we need to culturally maintain this respect for the attachment system if we're going to maintain it. So again, attachment, or the attachment system, from my perspective, is an evolved adaptation. Actually, the term was coined by a psychologist who talked a lot about the environment of evolutionary adaptiveness and really how humans came to need this system. I'm going to make the argument that healthy self-interest, as I'll define it in a moment, is a selective advantage, and that's why we are so wired to do this. I have a science background, so no presentation is complete without a graph. I'm going to give you a second to sort of take a look at this inverted U, something very common in biological systems, and kind of walk you through the axes. On the y-axis, I have the support network and a continuum from weak to strong, something you could sort of evaluate now and think about how strong you feel your social network is. If you then take that point and draw a line across, you'll see it would intersect in two places. If you're at the very top of the curve, it'll just intersect in that one point at the very top, and you have probably optimal network. If you have something that's suboptimal, it'll intersect in two places, and you may find that you have a tendency to have what I would consider an unhealthy self-interest, in that you are someone who gives more than you take on a regular basis, or perhaps you're someone who takes more than you give. And often these types of people pair up, and the sorts of relationships that develop don't really lead to the kind of attachment I'm talking about. They lead to sort of control-resist dynamics. But if you're really able to both give and take genuinely with other people, you have an optimal support network. And this is really the goal, and something that I will argue is really at the absolute root of everything in terms of resilience and being able to manage adversity. So what does this all mean when it comes down to work-life balance? I'm going to make the statement again at the bottom here, sort of a heuristic conclusion, that our higher level needs, our psychosocial needs, evolved to help us meet our lower level needs through collective efforts. But modern life has increasingly uncoupled those and make it very challenging for us. So to achieve well-being, integration is key. And it's not just modern life, it's really American life and American culture that presents a pretty big challenge for the attachment system. And so really the take-home message is sort of the subtopic of the slide title here, which is work, life, and self-care are not really separable. What does that really mean? I see healthy self-interest, as I just described it, as being the goal, and that making good decisions, if you couple those two together, you end up with filling those shock absorbers. So really, you will get more money, you will have more financial security, you will have more energy, and you'll have stronger attachments if you come from a position of healthy self-interest and you make good decisions. So again, self-other balance is really important, not giving too much, not taking too much, really having very mutually beneficial relationships with people. And again, that's time and face-to-face dependent. Good decisions. This really comes down to, especially as a business, small business owner, resource allocation. Where are you putting your time and money? Again, time management. Where are you choosing to put your effort? And what I call correctly connecting the dots. What I mean by this, and I'll get into it a little bit more, is really realizing that, again, these are not separable. We often talk about our financial security, or we talk about our relationships, or we talk about making time for ourselves. But really, you have to have a filter that is in place, a sort of a mindset, as some people on this call might call it, a mindset that allows you to filter all your decisions so that they're integrated through this one sort of view. So I don't like to think of well-being as a balance of competing interests, although we use the term work-life balance. They're really not. They really need to be integrated decisions around these issues. So what we usually think of as work is our financial security and our money aspect. But over here, our life, our physical health, our soul sustenance, our mental health, our relationships, which feed our energy levels and our attachments, these are not competing things. They do often take time in different ways, but we really have to integrate our decisions by looking at this very, very holistically. I'll just take a couple of minutes to give an example of my story, just not to advocate for particular decisions, but really to show you what I mean by this, something more substantive. And that is, when my kids were 6 and 8, I was consulting and I owned my own business in California. My husband was a PhD in genetics and was formerly a VP of R&D at a biotech company in San Diego. He left the position and became a stay-at-home parent to help me support my business. And he did that for what turned out to be 2.5 years. We reached a crossroads and we had to move. We decided to move, let him take his career reemerge, and he took a job at the U.S. Patent Office in the Virginia area, in the D.C. area. Now, we had a lot of decisions we had to make in that process. And one of them, the kids were 6 and 8. One of the decisions we made is that they would go to community college and then go to a 4-year commuter school. That drove our decision to buy a house 1.5 blocks from George Mason campus and about 3 miles from the community college. It was also within a 25-minute from my husband's job, so it was a 25-minute commute. We had to figure out how that was going to look financially. I didn't want to have to work. I was going to continue to work. I didn't want to have to. We were able to, because the kids were going to community college, they didn't have to be in competitive sports. We could travel freely in the summers. So all of our decisions for basically their whole childhood were through that filtration, everything we decided. And so the kinds of work I would accept, I wouldn't travel. And what we let the kids do or didn't do, what they could do, everything was very, very flexible because we had made that choice. So that's what I mean by integrating. And if you don't have a holistic and big picture view of your own life and what matters, you will tend to make decisions more in the moment and more impulsively around what's going on. I'm sorry, that went backwards. Okay, so this leads me to sort of life quality by design concept number 2, and it's a restatement of the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule. And it's just simply this: a small number of factors have a big impact on the quality of life. And really figuring out what those are and keeping, maintaining kind of an ongoing evaluation of that is really important. So I'm going to kind of take you back to the survey question I asked at the beginning and ask you to think about the thing where I asked if I could wave a magic wand, what would you do differently? And really that is a way to start thinking about what's your single greatest concern or fear about the future. What does that look like? And while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to tell you about when I first developed this set of questions as a way to get people talking about some of these issues. The very first time I did this sort of in a public and professional way was with a person I met at a networking session at this conference I attended. She was very nice, got talking to her, didn't know where she was from. The name tags purposely didn't indicate people's titles or their affiliations. So anyway, she was very nice. We spoke. I asked her some of these questions. She was interested. And her biggest concern or her magic wand wish was that she wished her parents lived closer to her. And it was because she was very worried about them. And so again, her biggest concern was about the fear of the future, was something would happen to them and she was not going to be able to support them in the way that she wanted to. So I started asking her a bit more about this. And so you really, in order to improve your quality, in her case, quality of life, would start thinking about, her social support network. So one thing she wasn't doing was tapping into her siblings. She was taking on all the responsibility as the oldest child. She also turned out she was a psychiatrist. So she really understood, and everybody turned to her in times of difficult situations. Her financial security was not something she was concerned about, but she was concerned that if she would have to relocate and leave her job, which was a very lucrative one, that she would not be able to necessarily maintain that. And she wanted to have her own retirement savings, et cetera, maintained. She was not so worried about her physical energy. She was very good at taking care of herself. However, she did find that some of the worry interfered with her sleep, and that would often then lead to physical and mental energy depletion. So most of her mental energy depletion was around this constant worry, and every time the phone rang and the caller ID showed that it was one of her parents or the parents, she was always wondering what was going to be on the other end of the line. And then so in her case also, this is really the circumstances of a loved one, something that she felt her parents were vulnerable, and that was worrying her. So I want you to just think about kind of any situation you're dealing with right now going forward. Which one of these things do you feel like you have some unmet needs around that you would need to address? And again, maybe you're doing super well, but maybe somebody that you know or live with or work with is struggling, and you could just use these tools to kind of help them because they're probably impacting you. And again, that's sort of the take-home message here in all of this and how it relates to this work-life integration is that time is the universal currency of life, and we need to spend it carefully and invest it wisely. And I like to think of it as, just in these three ways. How is what I'm doing affecting my physical and mental energy? Sometimes those are very linked. How is it affecting my attachments? Am I really taking care of important relationships? Am I really nurturing those relationships appropriately? And money and material things. Am I really sometimes compensating for lack of other things by focusing on that, or spending in a way just to relieve the pressure and not really addressing the root cause of what's going on? So you won't be able to read this possibly, and this is a tool. If I did it in person, I would just give you to take home if you want a copy of it, but it's something you can create for yourself. It's just an inventory, and it's like, obviously there's many tools out there that just have you inventory your time and how much time you spend doing things, but I just kind of added the 4 columns here that say financial security, physical energy level, mental energy level, and important relationships. And so in addition to just cataloging your time, really think about what is the return you get on that investment. So for example, obviously working, usually you're doing it to make money, although some people work without needing money. Some people really value their commute. My husband really actually enjoys his commute as an introvert with a fancy car that he likes, quiet time. So commuting actually helps his mental energy. So it's a different way of looking at your inventory. I had someone reach out to me from LinkedIn, and a LinkedIn interaction, and we had private conversation, phone call, Zoom call. And he's an engineer, a high-level executive at a South American energy firm. And we went through this exercise just so he could understand what I do. And also he was completely shocked about what it revealed about himself in terms of how he was spending his time and what was really lacking. And it became crystal clear. And he made some really quite fundamental changes as a result of that conversation. So again, I would encourage you to go through these things and to really sort of pay attention to how you're spending your time and what you're getting back from that. Oops. Okay, so again, this is sort of just to bottom line, and this will give us like 15 minutes to kind of go through questions and get your feedback, input in this dialogue. So healthy self-interest and good decisions, to me, these are just the foundation of everything. And they reflect your capacity to rely on and support others in order to get your needs met. And I just think that COVID probably really highlighted this to people. in a way that they hadn't experienced before. Just how much people in your life supporting. Yes, we all got things from Amazon. Yes, we were online with everybody. But having people in your life who really could take responsibility and help you manage the new challenges, I think really made people understand the value of it, and also maybe stretched it thin or really made you suffer if you didn't have it. Again, people I've spoken to throughout this process, especially healthcare workers, really parents with young children, this was a really tough time. So what, sort of what feeds into this would be your mindset, and what does that come from? Some sort of sense of your self-worth, how you feel about your intrinsic value, what I would say your self-esteem, how you feel about what you can contribute, your general capacity for relationships, your capacity to trust other people in particular, and your decision-making capacity. This is sort of skill and kind of your natural temperament. And these are just a few of the things that sort of feed into that. And where do these skills and abilities or these mindsets come from? Well, they come from a lot is influenced by your childhood experiences and sort of your starting point in life. And these are things that you had no control over. And so if you struggle with some of these things, it's to recognize it's not really your fault necessarily. And there's a lot of pressure on you that comes from things that happened even before you were born. Your genetic fingerprint or your epigenetic fingerprint, the time and place, the hands that you fell into, the experiences you lived through as a result of that. I've met many people, many different places. My own husband, for example, came from Iran. I met him when he was a political refugee. These are harrowing experiences that some people have that deeply affect who they are and how they behave. And sometimes throwing themselves into their businesses and their work is a way to compensate for some of these things that maybe they struggle with. So in terms of just taking action, and we think we'll be able to, I think my clock is a little ahead, so I'm going to allow a lot of time for discussion. I see lots of things coming in on the feed. I'm not reading them, although I'm tempted to. I'll just wait till the end and we can open things up. Okay, so again, kind of restating what I stated before, but just in terms of taking action. A small number of factors have a big impact on quality of life. So obviously focus first on what matters most. This is sometimes hard to nail down. Sometimes when I ask people about waving a magic wand, a common response will be win the lottery. And then when I dig deeper into that, as I did with one person I met, dig deeper, well, it turns out that she's worried about her financial security, but it got deeper than that. It turns out, again, she was a oldest child, a female child. She had parents that struggled with drug and alcohol abuse. She took on a lot of responsibility, and a lot of her siblings were not as successful in life as she is, and she has taken that on. They come to her for money and support, and so what she was really asking for in winning the lottery was to make them all go away in some sense, because she was really just being drained beyond what she could handle as she was advancing in her own years and responsibilities and businesses. Okay, so again, in terms of process, I would suggest, if you need to do this, to identify one critical action. To ask yourself, do I need to improve my functioning in relationships? Do I need to increase my physical energy? Do I need to increase my mental energy? Do I need to increase my financial security? What's that really about? What am I really, what's keeping me awake at night, if you will? Whoops, we did two steps at once here, but so to identify the single most important step you can take to make a change in your life, that's the goal. This is, I don't know if you've heard of a book by, I think her name's Mel Robbins. She has something called the 5-second rule. This idea that if you just identify something and kind of decide to act on it within five seconds, you're more likely to take action. One of the things that a quote from her book is, the secret is knowing what to do, or the secret is knowing what to do. It's knowing how to make yourself do it. And I think that that's key. So I suggest writing something down in 3 words or less. When I spoke to that one psychiatrist at the end of it, I asked her, where are you with this process? We had another 10 or 15 minutes of dialogue. And she took out a Post-it note and wrote it down, call my mom. She felt that being able to talk to her mother, with whom she had the stronger relationship, about how their circumstances in terms of not being willing to relocate and leave their home and consider a move to her area, how that was creating a huge amount of stress for her, that she needed to let them know that it was impacting her, and maybe start that dialogue. So I think with that, I will kind of end my part of this and open it up, to you all for questions, comments. I know, Chris, you've been kind of monitoring the chat box. I can scroll through it in a moment. But are there any things that have popped up, Chris, in the box that you'd like to communicate to me?
So I didn't see any actual questions in the box. There was a lot of dialogue. People responding to things you were talking about. Does anyone want to just unmute themselves and ask a question? Because this is a pretty small group. So feel free to just unmute yourself and ask your questions. I think you did such a good job, Nancy. They have no questions for you.
Well, I wouldn't mind. Let's just, kind of scroll. I'm sure there's it doesn't have to be a question. I mean, it can be a comment. I'd be interested in anything that you'd like to share with me or the group about what I've said. If you have different ideas.
I would like to know, what's everyone's magic wand wish? What's your magic wand wish, and what steps and decisions are you making to make that come true? Anyone? My magic wand wish is to not have a mortgage. That mortgage is hanging over my head, and I just want to be done with it. And I will be in 5 years. That's my wish. What's your wish?
Well, this is Kate, and so Nancy, I always love listening to you because I feel like you distill things in a way that make it very easy to figure out where to begin. And I was one of those people who mentioned right now, like, I have to say, I feel like I'm a 5. It's not that everything's perfect by far, but it's more just like, I'm healthy. My job, I have 2 jobs. I run my co-working space, which, we're not making money because surprisingly nobody wants to come in when, there's COVID, but I still was lucky enough to have a part-time consulting job. And then, so I was kind of thinking about, like, and I think as far as life goes right now, I was going to say like 4.5 to 5, but I was thinking about the magic wand thing. And it's funny, my husband and I, he's from California. I'm from New Jersey. And the reason I've been staying on the East Coast is really because my parents, specifically my mom, but she actually just passed away. And it's interesting because now it's like, okay, well, what's that magic wand? And oddly enough, when I envision a magic wand, it's me in a succulent garden, like in California. And I imagine myself going in to do a remote workshop and getting paid for it. But it's just kind of figuring out well, why, anyway, I don't know what the magic wand is. I don't even know what my question is, because I feel like I have such a good life, but I'm kind of trying to pinpoint now, okay, how do you be happy with what you have, but also continue towards a vision? And so this is really more of a comment and a discussion on how to enjoy what you have.
Well, I don't think
you know what I mean?
Yeah, Kate, first of all, welcome, Kate. Just so you know, Kate runs an adorable co-working space out near, I think it's technically in Ruston, is that?
Yeah, it's in Herndon, but right on the border. Mm-hmm.
It's out near the Dulles Airport, for those of you who know airports more than anything else. And, it's a very warm and cozy space that is open to anyone. It tends to focus on women and small businesses that allow people to come. So first of all, thanks for joining in, Kate, I know, and for offering up that comment, because I think, first of all, life is dynamic, right? So, as we're going along, we're getting older, our kids are growing, our parents are aging, our marriages are entering the marathon years, the post, 25-year mark, whatever. There's constant, it's like shifting of priorities. So I think reevaluating is, just a natural part of what we do. I think with respect to, though, some of the things you pointed out, right, that maybe there's a little bit of, say, guilt or something around the fact that your husband maybe wanted to be in California. He was away from his family, but, you know, women tend to really push to be close to their families. And maybe now, you know, that you've suffered the loss that you have, you feel a little bit liberated, and maybe you feel a little guilty about that. Like, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm saying these things out loud because,
oh, no, you're nailing it.
Well, when we allow ourselves to just have those conversations, like, you know, and if you do meditation or morning kind of routines that allow you, or talk to your friends or your spouses, and it's just an exploration. It's not necessarily that the answer is going to come to you, but what you find is, by just letting yourself and opening yourself up to just stating an answer to this, like you said, both of you said you don't know why the magic wand. Like, let's go back to Chris's point, mortgage. A lot of people don't want their mortgages. Why is that? Well, maybe their kids are going to be going to college. They know there's going to be more expenses. They're afraid that they're not going to manage upcoming expenses. They want to feel psychologically that that part is done. Some people take that sign and consider downsizing. You know, why? You could finish your mortgage sooner if you sold your house now and bought a cheaper place. I know somebody that just did that, actually. She took advantage of the empty nesters. You know, her daughters have just launched, and to avoid them coming back, she, you know, and her husband bought a small townhouse and moved 30 miles out. That saved them a lot of money, and they feel, you know, COVID really was a catalyst in that decision. They realize they're not really prepared for retirement, and they can't continue to support their kids. I think college debt is huge for parents. I think the pressure, so I'm in the DMV, or Fairfax County specifically, I can't tell you the number of people that feel very much the pressure to provide a $250,000 educational experience to each of their children. And if you've got more than one, or even if you have one, you know, I let myself off of that responsibility for a variety of reasons. And, you know, my kids paid maybe a little bit of a price, but in the end, they went to college, they graduated from college, and they had the opportunity. So anyway, that's me filling in the airspace. I really want to see if anybody else would like to share some of their experiences. I won't call on people. I do know that some people that I know that might be on here have some things that would be valuable to share. I'd like to ask you and invite you to do that if you feel comfortable. Otherwise, I can fill airspace all day. I'm going to scroll through while
hello, this is Ari. I just wanted to share, I guess, because I'm like in square one pretty much, so I have a lot to figure out. I just quit my tech job, and that was like my magic wand that I recently accomplished. But now the next is like just starting my business pretty much. So I was really stressed from my job, so now I'm like, oh, I'm kind of stressing myself out with my business too. So I want to manage that better because I did quit my job to be happier. So yeah, I have to figure out how to be like productive, but get things done while enjoying the process. So
Larry, can I ask you, did you go from a tech job to a tech consulting business or a tech related business? Or
No, not at all. I actually want to go into art.
Okay. So can I ask you a little bit more about that? Do you mind if I ask you these questions?
Yeah, sure.
No, I just want to know, so when you said you weren't happy with your job, was the not being happy related to the fact that you were really maybe always more a creative person underneath, and that maybe you were compelled to go to do something in college, made decisions to go into tech because it was lucrative, or pressure from somebody or some person, something? Can you tell me a little bit more about how you were unhappy and how the decision to be happier sort of came about?
Yeah, so definitely, first of all, I was a creative person. But yeah, I definitely wanted to take like a practical route, and I do like really wanted like stability, and I like having like just having like a lot of money to spend. I thought that was the easiest way, and a lot of jobs really didn't appeal to me. But yeah, I mean, I did think I made the right decision, at least like starting out with tech. It gave me a lot of like freedom, and I was able to help like my family out and get myself in a good spot. But yeah, a lot of stress was just really not caring about the industry. Like I only like a small part of it, but yeah, I really stressed myself out with the deadlines that other people impose on me, and like it's like every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you then, just because I mentioned the shock absorbers. How do you feel now that you're starting a business? Because it is, you're trading one set of stressors for another, but you have more control. So I think that's good, and the rewards are higher. So I want to encourage you to continue with that. It's definitely worth it. But do you feel like you have got the shock absorbers kind of in place? Do you feel like you're ready to, to navigate the challenges that come with starting a small business?
What do you mean by shock absorbers?
Well, do you feel like you have? Do you feel comfortable with sort of the financial resources you have? Because you may not immediately be super successful financially. And then, how do you feel about how much energy you have mentally and physically? Like, do you feel mentally healthy and really feel like you can draw good boundaries? Do you feel like you have a strong support system? And then that leads me to the last part. Do you have relationships and people who are behind you on this that you can turn to when you need some support?
Yeah, yeah, I've been planning this for like a year, I guess. So I definitely have to like downgrade my lifestyle, and I definitely like budgeted like, okay, let me try to get as much done as I can in like a year. Like I have savings for that, and then I can like take on freelance tech jobs if I need to. And my fiance has like my back a lot. Is kind of covering for me for the year. So I do feel very supported. I've come a long way. Mentally, I guess it's just, yeah, getting over the mountain and really just getting like just starting the shop really is my.
Well, let me give you a couple of words of encouragement. Just simply, so the whole idea of planning ahead and being financially prepared and downgrading is like excellent, because a lot of people don't do that, and that creates a huge amount of stress. When I think back for myself, when I started consulting in the year 2000, but I actually started saving for the prospect of quitting my job, because I knew that once I had children. So I started saving 3 years before my daughter was even born, that I didn't even have a child, that I started saving, and I banked a year's salary, gross salary, and had that in my bank account at the time when I finally pulled the trigger to quit my job when my daughter was 3, and then by then I had a son that was 1. So I had a full year's gross salary in the bank, and then I also kept my expenses low. I planned for that. I maintained my daycare situation for 2 days a week so that I could have the flexibility to still have childcare, but I budgeted for that. And it made the transition very smooth, and things went great. And then they kind of went down. And then if you're always filtering your decisions through being really clear about what matters. So when my husband took, off and left his career track as a Middle Eastern male with a PhD who came from, had a big position, to become a stay-at-home parent, that worked because we were all working in the same framework. And we understood that to make money, like my business was going gangbusters. It made more sense for me to continue and for him to stay home because he was miserable and be a stay-at-home parent. He got 2 days of golf a week. We kept the daycare. It all works, but you have to be constantly operating that framework. So that's just my message. Again, I'd like to hear from others. Thank you so much, Ari, for sharing. Thank you for Kate also, and for Chris. But some others, I'm not going to name people who might have.
No, I'll share, Nancy. This is Andra, and I'm about Nancy's age, and we both work in a similar field in sort of biotech consulting, I would say. And first of all, I think the assessment tools are fantastic. They really give me a lot to think about. And whereas Nancy's, I didn't know all the plans you've made, Nancy, but you were kind of hyper organized, I would say, or very organized and really thought things through. My life has been, in my career, much more haphazard. And I guess I was just really lucky, and I fell into the right place at the right time. And I have a very, very successful business. And I think and I've been doing it for about the same time since the year 2000. And I think now, you know, my magic wand or the things that I would like to change is I would like to actually be able to sort of moderate my work demands, which I've always had trouble with. I always have almost too much work, and then be able to form deeper social connections, that's what I think is the real void in my life. And just have a more of a personal support system. And I guess, you know, I didn't have a good marriage. I mean, not to get really personal. So I didn't have somebody to make these kind of decisions or talk with these things about. And so, you know, I find myself kind of in this situation now, which, you know, I feel really successful and really lucky, really happy with my career, but I kind of am missing these, the social connections.
Well, I'm gonna say a couple things. Well, first of all, thanks so much, Andrew. And I know that you're more introverted and not usually as comfortable speaking. So I super appreciate you voicing something so personal and important. Because a couple of things, though, you're not lucky. Although we have different styles, different personalities, different way we arrived at the same point. You know, you are an extremely conscientious, caring, thoughtful person. I won't disclose anything, but you know, I know that you know, she had a very, very stable job and in the federal government, in the sort of nature of the work that we do in biotech, and to leave that kind of experience, that stability, and to go into consulting is a really I don't remember exactly what catalyzed that choice for you, but the fact that you did it, it's not random. It's not that you're lucky. Luck, certainly, yeah, sure, there are certain things, but we really create opportunities for ourselves. And I think as women, we often don't take credit for having done the things, being brave, being honest, doing the difficult things, you know, going through a divorce, all of those things. And to also be, and I know you're a parent and have launched your child successfully. And I mean, these things take a lot of effort and take a lot of energy. And I think what often happens, especially for women, I do have some beliefs about gender differences that I think are true sexually dimorphic differences, not to get too much into that, but I think the tendency is to underestimate how much emotional energy, which is not something that gets compensated for in any kind of financial way by anyone. It can't. In fact, the very nature of true care and these social networks, they don't operate on cash. They are not. The currency is time and energy and emotional investment. And that's why they're so challenging. And then just to, like, again, to reemphasize a point I already made is America. So I'm a Canadian by birth, and I came to America and I learned so much about myself and about what makes America great and what makes America not so great in some ways, and some of the issues we deal with. I'm now an American citizen. I'm also a British citizen. And those different cultures, we are very status oriented, and very much our educational pedigrees play into who we are and what matters. Not for me personally, because I didn't grow up here, and I certainly wasn't successful in the school system, even where I was in Canada. But I really noticed that from the moment that I moved here, how much emphasis people place on that within any social professional event. You very much quickly find out usually where people went to school or what kind of jobs they've had. And it's not that people are bad. It's just this is what the conditioning leads you to. So anyway, I'll leave it there. So again, thanks, Andra. I'd like to hear it. We've still got about 8 minutes according to my various clocks. Maybe
we have time for one more person to share.
Steve, I still see.
Oh. Yeah. I was. I guess my biggest frustration was choosing a life purpose that is very challenging. Trying to shift our species in a more adaptive, more rational direction, you know, in whatever way, you know, with whatever talents or skill, you know, that I have to make that happen. How difficult, you know, that is, wanting to pass this life, leaving something a lot better for not only my children but for everybody's you know, children. It's a I think a worthy purpose, but very, very frustrating, knowing the reality of our species and a lot of the things, you know, that you discussed here, Nancy, and not wanting to give up the fight, but you know, there are difficult consequences to focus on something like that.
So what's your magic wand, Steve? What would you, if I could wave a magic wand and make change for you, what would that be then, in light of what you just said?
It would really be shifting the direction that our species is going. You know, in so many ways, we're very maladaptive rather than, you know, preparing for long-term survival of our species. I don't even think a lot of people even think in those terms. But you know, is there an intrinsic value to, you know, who we are as humans that you know, that are worth us continuing, you know, well into the future? And with a lot of the values, you know, that different nations and cultures have, you know, that aren't looking at those kind of, you know, deep and what I call significant, you know, challenges, and more being short-sighted or overly materialistic or ego and all those kind of things come into play, you know, that I'm very aware of. It's frustrating, but I can't, but I don't want to change that purpose, and I want to keep, you know, working toward it, which I think I'm doing. But it, you know, it takes a consequence on loved ones and financially and you know, stress levels and things like that. But it's also very fulfilling, and I said a 5 because, you know, I have a lot of what's necessary to keep me moving in that, you know, direction, but it's still very frustrating. And so my magic wand would be to change humanity.
Well, yeah, I think, well, you raised a couple of points that, or a couple of things that catalyzed some other thoughts in my mind. One of the things, it's not, and I know because I know you, this doesn't necessarily apply to you, but one of the things you said I think could be useful for other people. And one of the things I've found, because what you're expressing is a lot of concern for others, right? And I one sort of, I'll call it a red flag, when I meet people. One of the things I've noticed, and these people that I know have met and then come to know well, is this what I'll call the exaggerated concern for the abstracted other. That there's a lot of worry and a lot of intensity around big problems. And there's a tendency to get sucked into that because of the nature of our culture. And I think, again, social media, mainstream media, I think polarization politically has made people spend a lot of time in that space. And in my general experience, it's not productive. It's not productive for you or for the kind of bigger picture things you're trying to achieve. What really seems to be more valuable for people in the long run is to focus on specific relationships and specific people. So, I mean, I can think of a couple of people I know, somebody I know that was retired at the age of 62. They took in a foster child that they ended up adopting because they worked with their children to agree to also adopt the child should something happen to them if they were, you know, to predecease this child as a minor. And they actually have lived into their late 80s, and the child has launched. And, you know, it's these kinds of things that lead to much more rewarding experiences than maybe donating money or volunteering your time. That's not to say you shouldn't do those things or that being concerned about other people more generally is a bad thing. It's just, I think, sometimes there's something underlying that. It's a defense mechanism. It's a way to avoid a vulnerability of getting close to people and really relying on people. It's a way to keep, you know, things at a distance. So one of the things I say, I've written about it a couple of places, and I say this often on LinkedIn, is, you know, compassion is the lukewarm cousin of care. It's, you know, something we can do that's scalable, but does not feel as satisfying as being in relationship with people in very close proximity, and that we have an emotional investment in them. So, Chris, I'm seeing I'm going to just put up my thank you slide just because my logo is this picture. It's a painting that actually my father was an artist. It was a painting my father did of an oasis in Death Valley, and I truncated it and just put these 4 trees. You know, to me, it represents the fact that beautiful life can thrive in the harshest of conditions. So we should remain optimistic, and that those 4 sort of trees remind me that social networks, financial security, physical health, mental health. So again, thank you to everybody, and I'll leave it to Chris for the last words.
Well, thank you, Nancy, and thank you to all of you who've joined us today. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and I feel like you've gotten at least one nugget of wisdom from Nancy that you can take away. I'm going to take away that magic wish wand and ask everyone I know what their magic wish wand is. Magic wand wish. So I look forward to, and I hope that you will all join us for the next installment of this wellness series. I have put that link in the chat if you want to register for next week on Thursday. Next Thursday, we are going to learn how to overcome the physical and mental challenges of running your business. And so with that, I'm going to say thank you. The sun has come out where I am in Arlington. Enjoy your day and enjoy your lunch, the rest of your afternoon. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, before I leave you, I will send out the presentation. Please note it is Nancy's proprietary information. And I will send out the recording of this webinar once I figure out how to do that. Good seeing everyone.
Good luck with
Bye-bye.
it. Thanks to everyone for coming again, and I really appreciate it. And for those of you I see often, I'll see you again soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Nancy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.